The following was recorded during the COVID-19 pandemic through Zoom meetings in accordance with local health guidelines. Hi, I'm Mike Maloney, and welcome to another CSRM podcast. Today's episode is hosted by Dr. Greg Linville.
Hi, welcome back to another CSRM podcast. We're joined today internationally, actually on two different days, even though this is being recorded simultaneously. Stephen, it is Tuesday morning your time. It's Monday evening my time. Amazing what we can do these days. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you.
Yes. Stephen comes to us because of a connection that we have in terms of the theology of competition and sport, and he's written a book that is one of the best in this area that I have read. And so we're really excited about you joining us today and talking through some of these things. But to get us started, Stephen, give us a little bit of a background of yourself. Give us your sporting journey and your faith journey as well.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Look, I'm speaking to you from the Blue Mountains, just outside of Sydney in Australia. And these days, I'm married with two children. I'm a pastor at a church here, and I still play some sport. But throughout my life, God has been the major part of my life. Thanks to God, I became a follower of Jesus when I was about 10 or 11 years old, and that's been a wonderful experience. It's had its ups and downs, like I guess everyone, but I've been a Christian all my life. But I guess also for the purposes of this particular podcast, I am and have been throughout my life an incredibly keen and enthusiastic sports person. I love playing sport. I love watching sport. I love reading about sport. When I was younger, I used to collect autographs of sports people and create, complex sporting encounters with my toys on the floor at home. So I guess for my life, I've been very keen about sport. I've been, to the best of my ability, a keen Christian. And I guess that's given me the opportunity, to think through how sport and Christianity fit together. Now, I'm in Australia. I imagine most people watching this are in the United States. But growing up, my main sports were cricket and soccer. So I guess cricket's not unlike baseball in some respects. Soccer, I know you have a lot of soccer over there.
And you call it soccer? You call it soccer?
We actually call it football here.
Yeah.
But every country has different understandings of what football means. So I wasn't quite sure whether if I said football, you'd think, American football, or whether you'd think soccer or rugby,
Amazing how you call it football and you play it with your feet, with a ball.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's quirky. And then in high school, I played pretty well every sport I could think of. I did, athletics, volleyball. I played a bit of baseball, etc. And I got to the point where at the end of high school, when I was about 17, I had the, potential to pursue three sports professionally: cricket, athletics, or rugby league. And cricket really was my first love. So I decided to really pursue cricket. I played at a pretty good standard. When I was 20, I went to London and played a season over there. I almost made it as a professional cricketer, but probably by the time I turned 22, I realised I just missed out. A number of my peers went on to play cricket for Australia and became world famous cricketers. I guess I'm one of the many who just missed out, partially through a combination of injury, had a lot of leg injuries, and probably a technical flaw. But I continued to play sport just for, enjoyment at a fairly high level into my 30s. And then I kept playing soccer and cricket, and then until I was about 50. And these days I participate in masters athletics, do a bit of shot put, discus, javelin, hammer. I did athletics at school, but it's a nice sport at the masters level. And the good thing about it is it doesn't take up quite as much time as cricket. Cricket takes a massive amount of time, a bit like golf, I think. And when you're a pastor of a church and married with kids, time becomes something of a premium. There's a bit about me.
Well, you will be very pleased to know that my son and I, we spent some time with the Christians in Sport folk in England, and he was being tutored in cricket by Andrew Wingfield Digby, if you know the right reverend. And he came back, and he was one of the top 100 cricket players in America. Now, there's only 150 of them, so I don't know what that says, but
he's in the top 100. That's good.
So yes, and I've been told, Stephen, that I would make a great cricketer. Anybody that has watched me play baseball in America knew that most of my balls went over the fence behind me
Right.
rather than in front of me, and they just thought that was a great play for cricket for reasons that I can't understand. But anyway, getting past the very bad humor, you obviously have these two loves, and you have been trying to integrate them. Tell us about then how this book came to be.
Yeah, so I wrote a book which was published this year called The Good Sporting Life. And I guess one of the things I was really keen to do was to help. Now, there it is, The Good Sporting Life. One of the things I was keen to do was to help Christian people think about sport Christianly. Now, I'm familiar with the Christian scene in Australia and England, less so in the United States. But here in Australia, there are many Christians who their Christian life is like there, and their sporting involvement is over there. And it's like they're two separate spheres of their life. They don't sort of interact in any way. I was talking to a very fine Christian gentleman who's in fact from England, and he was telling me that when he was a younger Christian man, he saw no connection between sport and his faith. He had his Christian life, and his sport was like something he did in his time off from being a Christian. It was nice that God let him play a bit of sport when he wasn't being Christian. And, I've come across that quite a bit. And what I wanted to do is to help Christians to see how sport should be and can be wonderfully part of their Christian life. There are so many positives that are associated with sport, but we're in a fallen world, and there are also certain dangers associated with sport. So the reason I wrote the book was to help Christians think about sport Christianly, to make them aware of what the Bible would say about sport, its many benefits, and the great things that can be achieved through it, but also to be realistic as well, and to be aware of the dangers which people can come across participating in sport. And it was really aimed, the book, at Christians who play sport at any level. So my hope is that it's of help to professional Christian sports people right down to the most casual dabbler in sport who just plays a little bit, an hour a week or two here and there. So I guess that's what I was trying to do, is just think about sport Christianly.
And you've done that very well. I'm going to go through some of the chapters here and bring out a couple of things. And your first chapter is playing by the book. And we have a shared, very good friend, Stuart Weir, who has actually written what the book says about sport. And I know that most people, when they hear that, or at least a lot of people, when they hear that, they're like, what? They don't think that's even possible. And I know this is a little bit maybe hard for you to do, but just as you wrote that first chapter, what were you thinking playing by the book? You want me to ask you a more specific question about playing by the book?
I guess the first chapter... Sorry,
go ahead.
I guess in the first chapter, I was trying to think about, well, what would the Bible say about sport? Now, on one level, it refers to sport and games a little bit. It refers to running the race and, boxing and not beating the air and that sort of thing. Those passages, like, for instance, in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, they're using sport, I guess, as a metaphor to make some other point. They're not really talking about sport per se. having said that, I don't know whether Paul would really use sport as a metaphor for the Christian life if he thought sport was an inherently bad thing in itself. So I assume that Paul either thought sport was neutral or mildly positive, and he does say that physical training is of some value in one of his letters. But I guess the approach I took was to see that really, well, I think sport can be argued to be a gift from God, in that God creates a good world. He puts us in a good world, and if you read the Genesis accounts, it tells us to develop that world. And throughout history, humans have developed God's incredibly wonderful creation. We've come up with, architecture, wonderful foods, great culture, and sport. I think historically play became games, which has now developed into sport. And so I think we can see sport is actually part of God's good gift to us, which we can enjoy. God said in Genesis 1 and 2, enjoy the garden, just don't eat of that one tree. Now, we tend to focus on the one tree we shouldn't have eaten from, but the rest of the garden was there to enjoy. And we look around the world, there's clearly so much to enjoy in the world. Humans, with their God-given gifts and abilities, have come up with great things like sport, which we can enjoy. And so I guess one of the things I was keen to establish that sport is a good gift from God. It's good in and of itself. And as we sat and reflected further, we could then start to think of all the many benefits. But I think sport is a great gift.
There's a portion in the chapter that you talk about intrinsic values and again, whether it's inherently good or evil. And I think that there is some question and thinking about that, some debate even about is it intrinsically, inherently good or evil? And how would you respond to the fact that it is neither intrinsically good or evil, but what people bring to it, that it's amoral. It's not moral or immoral, but it's amoral. How would you react to that?
That's an interesting point. I think I would say that sport is intrinsically good to the extent that the sport is not based on some immoral principle. So if someone developed a sport which was, a fight to the death sport, that clearly infringes all sorts of ethical things in the Bible. And so you wouldn't say that was intrinsically good. But sports which are just enjoyable, promote recreation, enjoyment, camaraderie, all sorts of things like that, I think that's inherently good, in the same way that I would say that a beautiful sunset is inherently good. The thing about sport, though, is that sport exists in a fallen world, and like all God's gifts, whether it's music, whether it's painting, whether it's food, whether it's architecture, it can be marred by sin, it can be misused. And, as I say in the book, the two real dangers which come up with sport is they can take a good thing like sport and turn it into a God thing, which is idolatry, or you can take a good thing like sport and associate it with bad behaviour, which is immorality. So I think I would argue that sport is inherently good. It's a good gift from God, but it can be damaged, even ruined by sin, and we need to watch out for that.
Excellent points, and anybody that has read anything that I've written or heard our podcast before know now at least a small portion of why I think it's so important to have this conversation with you, Stephen. And you just warm my heart in terms of how you're thinking about this. At the very least, that we need to reemphasize what you said, that there is how you interact with it is so vitally important. And then you use a phrase, I think it's called the instrumental value, and that was a new thought for me, new concept. Explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so I argue that sport, it has intrinsic merit. It is good in and of itself. It's a great gift from God. We love to play it. It's enjoyable. But sport has lots of instrumental benefits associated with it. So playing sport is great for friendships. Playing sport is potentially great for Christian witness. Playing sport is potentially great for Christian encouragement and discipleship. It can be great for our health. It can be really important for character development. And I think that's, from what I've read, that's something which is very big in the United States, that sport is seen as a great means to develop character. It can provide employment. It can give you opportunities for travel. And so, yeah, there are wonderful benefits which we can experience through playing sport, a number of which I've just listed.
You also mentioned that some of the spiritual sides of that. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, look, I think that if we're Christian sports people, we're primarily Christians who are involved with sport, not sports people who happen to be Christians. You know, God is our top priority, and everything falls into place underneath that, which includes sport. Now, my view is that we get the most out of sport and we get the most out of life by putting God first, by staying close in our relationship with God. So I guess the important thing for any Christian, whether they play sport or not, it's important that we stay close in our relationship with God, that we're reflecting on his word daily, we're praying to him daily, we're in regular Christian fellowship. And so one of the things I say to people who play sport is, professionals right down to just very casual participants, it's best for you, it's best for your spiritual life, it's best for the kingdom of God, it's even best for your appreciation of sport, is if your relationship with God is as close as you can make it. And if we are in, from the sports perspective, if we're putting God first, staying close to God, loving Jesus, following him, it helps us to appreciate the good parts of sport, avoid the bad parts associated with sport. And any sports person would know, and I'm sure you know this yourself, Greg, that when we're playing sport, we have our real ups and downs. You have our successes, we have our failures, we have victories, we have defeats, we're healthy, we get injured. You know, it's a real roller coaster. But my testimony would be, and the testimony of many high-level Christian sportsmen to whom I've spoken, is that if our relationship with God is close, it helps us to better negotiate the ups and downs that we experience through sport.
All right, so I'm going to push you a little bit on this one concept because a lot of people, I think, justify sports ministry in terms of it being able to be used for discipleship or evangelism, even more so for evangelism. Now, in the CSRM world, we talk it, we put that in a continuum. We call it evangelistic disciple making, because we think you can't really do them apart from one another. They have to be both. But in terms of those that have said its instrumental use is for evangelism, how would you respond to this critique? And that is, prostitution would also bring a lot of people into the church. There's an instrumental use for that, or to have drug parties, and you're going to get high, and people come to church because you're getting high. That's an instrumental use for evangelism. So how would you respond to that critique?
Yeah, well, Christians want to be salt and light in the world, and one of the things which Christians want to do is to attract people to Jesus. And the way we attract people to Jesus is by living and speaking Christianly, and that's inherently attractive. And I would suggest that, you know, drug taking is not living Christianly, and so it might have a certain appeal at one level, but it's ultimately damaging. I'd say the same thing about prostitution. It may have a certain appeal to some people at one level, but it's ultimately very damaging, as I'm sure we know. Sport has an appeal, but sport played well and in a good way is a good thing. It can bring glory to God. It's quite different. I mean, you could, one of the benefits of sport is that it's great for relationships and evangelism. Similarly, you could do similar things with music or with painting or cooking and things like that. It's just that my thing happens to be sport. So I think you've got to use things which are good to attract people. You don't want to use things which are bad but may look good to attract people. How's that?
Yeah, excellent. And these are concepts that people are going to have to knock around. They're going to have to come to their own conclusions on. But these are some of the basic issues. We're talking with Stephen Liggins, who has written a book, The Good Sporting Life. Did I get all that right? Yes. loving and playing sport as a follower of Jesus. And we're speaking in different days. He's on Tuesday, I'm on a Monday, but we are coming together on this, and we're going to wrap up this segment of this podcast. There's much more to come. We're going to tackle a few other issues about those people who are playing sport at an elite level, some of the things that they need to be concerned about, thinking about, prepared for. We'll talk about that age-old question about Lord's Day sport and how we get into some of that. So please do schedule your time to join us in future podcasts, as this is the first of a series that we're doing with Stephen. And we're recording this during the COVID time, and it's a pandemic, and so I am outside, and there may be some background noise, and we're trying to clean things up technology-wise. But thanks for joining us for this thing, and Stephen, thanks for being with us here, and we'll continue our dialogue.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been great to speak with you, Greg.
CSRM's podcasts are a resource provided by the Association of Church Sports and Recreation Ministries and its production house, Overwhelming Victory Flicks. This episode was produced by Dr. Greg Linville and edited by Andrew Fouts. For more information about CSRM, visit csrm.org. For more information about our publishing and production houses, visit csrm.org and click on the Resource tab. For CSRM Podcasts, I'm Mike Maloney. Have a blessed day.